we're so happy to have you both on with us because I didn't realize how entertaining this would be. I mean, of course, we know the music, we love the music, we love documentaries, about our favorite musicians, but this one is just it's just wild, and especially watching the making of behind the scenes. There must have been so much on this that I don't know. This could have been twice as long, I bet, right?
I think the first rule of show business is always leave them wanting more.
Yes.
And I don't think anybody's ever walked out of a cinema saying that film was too short. So, and I also appreciated the irony of making a relatively brief film about a progressive rock band as well.
Yeah.
Some of our short songs are longer than the film. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Well, and Tony, you must you feel good about showing this to the world because now you're thinking, see what I have to deal with.
There's an element of that, but also it's nice to see what everybody else has to deal with. But I think the thing that's so important to stress, and I really want to come through the film, is that everybody does go through some, they have difficult experiences in this band, and as Mel says, some people go through hell, but they make extraordinary music as a result of it. And so for me, it's a film about the creative process as much as it is about a particular band, because it demonstrates that if you want to make something good, you've got to be prepared to make some sacrifices.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Yeah. So Tony, now that everybody's seen what you had to go through, you're probably like, see, there it was, right?
Yeah. There was. I think the first time I saw it in theaters, when it was in a theater, and I got up to speak afterwards, I was asked to. I said pretty much exactly what you said. Yeah, but in a way, I didn't really realize how deep and dark some of the history and some of the subtext was of the band, just because I was focused on the music. So you can imagine, for me, it was quite an emotional experience learning about the history of the band when seeing it, and seeing the dark side exposed, and also the how realistic and difficult to present is this. Bill Rieflin, one of our wonderful drummers, who was toured for years in the band, knowing he was dying of cancer. And even though he was my good friend and musical associate, I never really had that conversation with him. Well, Toby did. Toby went right into his dressing room and said, "What's this like for you?" And so that makes for a fantastic element, one of the many interesting threads of the documentary, but for me, pretty emotional seeing the film.
Mm-hmm. And now, Toby, there must have been some things that you probably couldn't include, not just for time, just for content wise. Was there some things that you're just kind of like, I wish I could put this in, but I just can't?
It was mostly the nudity that I had to cut out, to be honest.
That'd be me, right?
Just everyone. It's just so often I'd come around the corner and 2 or 3 members of King Crimson would be tuning up in the nude, and just for the sake of the ratings, I had to cut those scenes.
And of course, all the partying and wildness,
Yes.
While we practice.
Yes.
I must admit, I have been to better after show parties than the King Crimson ones.
He's being those, of course, you haven't seen the film. There's a huge amount of practicing done every day before the show by almost all of the members of the band. So.
Jacko said to me fairly early on, he said, "This is not a band that halfway through rehearsal busts into Mustang Sally for a laugh."
Yes.
But in terms of what I left out, there's mostly, I mean, documentaries are all about what you leave out, really. But the things that I regret leaving out, I think all the stuff which speaks to the nature of the band and their creative process and why people do it, that's in the film. There are some elements of performance that I just couldn't squeeze in because they weren't directly related to story that I regret. And there's an extraordinary sequence where Gavin Harrison is talking to me about the sort of physical nature of how difficult what he has to do is. And then he talks about a particular measurement of time, which he says is impossible to do, and then he proceeds to show me him doing it on the drum, which is quite extraordinary. There are moments like that, but I think that DGM, the King Crimson record company and management company, have a good history of putting stuff out. So I imagine some of that stuff will trickle out over time. But I'm on the whole, I have very little regrets about what I didn't include in the film.
And Robert's happy with all this?
The nature of King, I mean, I think I can't speak for Tony, and I'm not in King Crimson, but I think it's very significant. For me, the film starts when Bill Rieflin looks into camera and says, "Now that I know what you want, I know what I can withhold in order to gain more power." So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, but this is not a band where you sort of seek Robert's approval. It's maybe it's more to do with an absence of disapproval that you're after. But this is not a film for Robert Fripp. It's a film commissioned by Robert Fripp, but it's a film to introduce other people to what King Crimson is.
Yes. And would you agree with that, Tony?
Yes. I would use the word unflinching and honest.
Yes.
No matter what. And it's such, I think, if you don't know King Crimson, if you're not into rock, it's an extraordinary film to see. You will not see another documentary like this, as you will not hear another band like King Crimson.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, both of you have had great, interesting career paths where, people are looking up to you and thinking, that's what I want to do. And so what advice would each of you have for someone that wants to follow in your path?
After you, Tony.
I was hoping after. I've been terrifically lucky. I've been making music for my whole adult life and before that a little bit, and that in itself is what I wanted to do. That was my goal, making good music and being part of good music. And so I was lucky early on to have a good goal, an achievable goal, and a lot of it's luck. And anybody who aspires to, I couldn't tell you how to try to be a rock star. I wouldn't know. I never wanted to. But to try to make good music, it involves a lot of work and a lot of interaction with other good musicians. And with some luck, you could do it for a career, as I have.
Well said. Toby?
I think that I think what makes you an artist is your intuition. That there's something unique to you that makes certain things in your environment resonate, whether that's images you like or sounds you like or whatever. And I think it's your job as an artist to recognize that intuition and then express it through a discipline of one kind, whether that's painting or learning how to play the bass and so on. But the great thing about the making of art for me is that the more you make art, the better you become at making art, but also the more you understand the reason why you are making art and what you want to say with it. And that to me is the creative process. So it's a question of recognizing that intuition in yourself, that desire to say something, and then working out the best way to do it. And then once you've done that, then you hone your craft and you apply discipline. One of the things that I've worked in rock and roll for decades now, and I include myself in the same group of people who recognize that, like, being involved in rock and roll, particularly its creation, allows for a significant amount of bad behavior. Most people are quite forgiving about bad behavior, but what was really significant working with the musicians that I did in King Crimson is that they're all still in the game for a reason. And that reason primarily is that no matter what, the music comes first. So they may have, unusual lifestyles outside of the music making process, but when it comes to the making of music, everybody is, as Bill Rieflin says, is, they're present and they're paying attention. And that really is what makes the difference, I think, is that commitment to the thing that's important, which in this case is music.
Absolutely. Well, and Tony, you played on a whole bunch of songs that everybody knows outside of King Crimson. What are the ones that people ask you the most about?
Oh, goodness.
Mhm.
Usually it's they who ask. So I'm just
Yes.
yes, I played with John Lennon, Pink Floyd, Paul Simon, Carly Simon, James Taylor, um, Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't prepare a list, so I'm sorry. And I've played with a number of equally great artists who are not that famous and people don't know.
Mhm.
So my experience is, yay, I got to make some great music and be inspired by this artist, and not so much by their name or fame or how many records they sold.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. My co-host Drew Pearson was one of our great Dallas Cowboys, one of our NFL greats. Caught the Hail Mary, went into the Hall of Fame a couple of years ago, and we're so proud of him. And he wanted me to make sure I asked both of you your Hail Mary moment, which is that moment in your life or career where you just had to go for it and it worked out for you. What do you suppose that was for each of you?
Wow, that's
Yeah,
never been asked that. Good for Drew Pearson.
new one.
Wow.
Yes.
I'm going to say I was at Carnegie Hall playing a jazz concert. Not I do play sometimes jazz with Gary Burton, a wonderful. I was young,
Mhm.
and I don't solo that well or that often, but I was soloing, and the bass strap broke, and if you know bass guitar, you kind of have to hold it up if you're not seated. So I was stuck with it, and I found myself standing on one leg, flamingo like, holding the other leg holding the bass up, and I thought this is there's a choice here. I could give up on this solo. I struggled to solo anyway. I could give up on this, or I could just like go with it, and even if I fall down, and I decided to go with it, and that was my Hail Mary. I'm not sure I caught the cat pass, but that was my Hail Mary moment. And thanks for asking.
Of course. Toby.
Um, I've got a similar one-legged story, I suppose. When I was young, I had some serious pain in my leg, and I complained about it for several months. And eventually, I was taken to see a specialist about it. But I broke the leg on the morning I was going to see the specialist, and so I was taken into hospital. And I woke up feeling very, very sorry for myself. And I was like, "I told you so." And I was in a great amount of pain, and I realized I was in traction. And then I looked around the hospital ward that I was in, and its specialty was the straightening of people's curved spines. So it was like waking up in a Victorian torture chamber for children. And I remember thinking, you know what, this is fine. I don't, So it was a really important moment in sort of the subjugation of ego and a sense of like being hard done by and something. And I think that whilst no one who knows me would say that I effectively subjugate my ego very often, but I think that ability to be aware of other people's experiences, even if only in reference to your own, is a really good basis for being a documentary maker.
Yeah, I love that. Well, part of being in a band like King Crimson or making a documentary about them, it requires like intense focus and part of that is staying in the right mindset for things. And so, what do each of you tell yourselves when you're sort of in the game, so to speak, that kind of keeps you on the right path even when the days are tough?
I'll go first again. With
Sure.
Crimson, we haven't toured in a while now, but when we're
Mhm.
touring, the music is very dense, very complex, very mentally challenging, even for those of us who do it all the time. And I can notice, I did notice if we go 2 days in a row without a day off, which we often do, the music, it doesn't take much for one guy to make a tiny mistake. So being rested in whatever way you can, it doesn't mean, to me, it doesn't mean getting more sleep. But that is a band, and that is an experience where I really need to mentally be rested and ready for the show, and ready to give my full, more than my full concentration, to give as much concentration as possible to those 2 or even 3 hours that King Crimson is on stage.
Mhm.
I think watching Crimson at rest as well as at work, one of the things that I noticed was just how disciplined Tony was in doing that, in creating that space where, you know, he wasn't sort of being bounced around by circumstance and stuff. He clearly had a routine and a practice that was as significant. Well, it's not for me to say whether it was as significant, but it looked as significant as his discipline when he's playing music. So that seemed it seemed very effective. For me, it was drinking heavily.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. I was not brought into the King Crimson creative space, I think, because of my discipline. I have the strong sense, but I don't have any evidence for this, but I have the strong sense that Robert was interested to see what would happen if he introduced some chaos into the mix, but, you know, not into the music.
I'm not sure if you're joking about that or not, but I believe that after saying
I'm not joking. I am largely joking about the drinking, actually.
Yes.
I was very tempted, but I actually stayed off it.
All right. Well, you know, the interesting thing about this film is that it explores so many other things besides just the band, you know, and there's so many just life things that are in here, and depending on whether or not you know the music or not, or you know what it is that you're into, you'll get something different out of this. What is it that both of you are hoping that people will see through just the music here?
I have no doubt that anyone who sees this film will be struck with its originality, and will think, this is not what I was expecting, whether they know the band or not. This is an extraordinary human revelation in many ways, many threads, most of them dark and some of them very funny. And those are two things that aren't juxtaposed too often. And in between, there's some darn good music, but that's not really what the film is about. So I think people will leave thinking, I never saw a documentary like this.
Yeah, that is true. And Toby?
I mean, if there's the film starts with a metronome inside a skull, and no one's ever asked me a question about that, or more importantly, no one's ever said to me, could you not come up with a slightly more sophisticated metaphor than that? But it's a film that's about time and death, and as well as about being King Crimson. But one of the alternative titles I had for the film was Time Lords, because there's a cosmic and existential irony to seeing a group of older men, one of whom is in the process of actively dying, having these quite intense creative conversations and sometimes conflicts about these tiny, very sophisticated measurements of time, whilst, you know, the hourglass is running out at the same time. So I was struck by the sort of cosmic irony of that. And then as a documentary maker, you're always looking for an effective way to show your audience why something matters. And so when you've got someone in the band who's literally dying and they're choosing to spend their last months on Earth making a particular type of music, I can't think of a more powerful way to show an audience that this really matters. And Robert in the past has said that he wanted me to show, you know, what King Crimson is. And Robert being Robert, he's also mentioned that he doesn't think that the film does that. But for me, above anything else, that what the film demonstrates is that King Crimson is something to live for. And I think you see that in the faces of the fans, and you see that in the commitment of the musicians. It's clearly not a band that's a total laugh to be in, you know, but the reason people keep on doing it in spite of that, or being in it in spite of that, is what fascinates me about the band, you know. And in that way, it's a metaphor for the pursuit of creative and artistic excellence. So it resonates over and above just King Crimson. But with regard to the music, there are two things, one of which is I wanted to sort of score the film, as it were, with you know, all of this fantastic music from, you know, 5 decades, and at the same time, there's a sort of conceit that we keep returning to a live performance of the band in studio, as well as we hear stuff from the various records. And ironically, you know, a lot of sort of hardcore King Crimson fans have said there's not much music, there's not enough music in it. There's music in basically all of it, except where Robert's literally talking about silence. But then, that all said, it's a film. It's not a record, you know, and so the best way to experience the music is live, which may not be an opportunity for people anymore, unfortunately. But still, I think, you know, I think it's better to listen to the sound than watch the sound, as it were. But I think the film is in part designed to give people a reason to go and listen to the records, to see, you know, why people are willing to put themselves through this very particular experience.
Yes, absolutely. Well said. Well, thank you both so much for being with us today, and thank you for making this film. It was so insightful and so interesting. We're going to tell everyone to check it out, and I look forward to talking to both of you again sometime soon.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Paul.
much.
Okay, thank
Thanks
you
for
so
having
much.
us.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Cheers.